to forbid the use of condoms, either as a form of birth control or as protection against HIV?
I think I would want to say that condoms don't lack their advocates. There are plenty of people who are doing that. And I don't know, you will know better than I, but my impression is that they're well available in places. I think the deeper point that the church wants to make is, in a phrase, to keep sexuality as profoundly human.
A cardinal supervises the ceremonial burning of condoms and safe-sex literature. What shapes Catholic and Protestant evangelical attitudes to sexuality, particularly in relation to abortion and stem cell research, is the idea that the human embryo is endowed with an immortal soul at the moment of conception. But most embryos never implant in the womb. They're naturally expelled from the body and die, meaning that heaven must be mostly populated by people who never existed. Does that make any sense?
I quite understand that many moments of embryonic conception do not come to fulfillment. But the prudent position, it seems to me, is to say that's when the mystery begins.
Dogma that seems to ignore the reality of the human condition is serious enough. Even more alarming is a rising tide of fanaticism and murder committed in the name of religion. Since the fall of communism, virtually all the great conflicts of our time are, at root, religious conflicts. Men, it's usually men, claim God-given authority to suspend all the rules of human decency and to massacre, mutilate, and terrorize in God's name. How can people of faith like you change the perception that religion is irrational and violent?
Yes, I think you're right. What we are facing now is really a perception that religions are responsible and religious people responsible of atrocities and violence. Use of religions to kill people, to kill innocent people, and to promote a kind of us versus them. The dogmatic minds. This is where we have to struggle. So there is coming back to the essence of your religion and being able to face the people from your own religious community who are betraying the very essence of your religion.
Religion is one of the most powerful forces in human life, and all powerful forces can be used for good or for ill and for harm. And I do believe that God right now is setting us the most serious challenge we have ever been set. He has given us many faiths, but only one world in which to live together. And unless we as religious individuals can meet that challenge, no shift of perception is even going to be relevant. We must somehow find a way of seeing the trace of God in the face of a stranger.
And if we fail, are we to expect more and more of this? 19 men on a mission of mass murder in the name of their faith and in the certainty of their reward in the life to come. And out of the smoke and dust, a remarkable image, the New York Fire Brigade chaplain being carried out of the wreckage, dead in a chair.
He was this man. He'd gone in this building with the men to whom he was the priest. He was their chaplain. And he'd given his life alongside of them as they fought against this terrible atrocity, committed in the name of religion.
So hard to fathom. Muslim and Christian sacrificing their lives that same morning. Some to kill, others to save, and both equally certain that God was on their side. And that has been the pattern of religious conflict throughout history.
For 1,000 years, Jews trembled at the word Christian. And I have to say, with pain, that the Jewish experience of Christian Europe was, for nearly 1,000 years, a very tragic experience. It added words to the vocabulary. Words like expulsion, inquisition, forced conversion, auto-da-fé, ghetto, and pogrom.
As you look back over the history of the Church, from the Inquisition to the recent scandals, what do you feel?
I was very taken, as I'm sure many people were, when just before the millennium, Pope John Paul held this ceremony of reconciliation and forgiveness in St. Peter's. He knelt before a crucifix and held before the Lord his view of the failings of the Church. He talked about the Inquisition, and he included any use of force in the cause of truth. He included and the betrayal of the trust that had been placed in the Church. That's an important moment, and I think it's something that, in a very small scale, the Catholic community does at the beginning of every Mass. When we gather to pray, our first act is to confess our sins. And we, in Catholic tradition, always understand the Church to be a church of sinners. That's why I have a place in it.
In the final part, we look at the challenges facing those who believe that religious faiths rooted in ancient texts can be relevant for all time.
Why aren't you all queuing up outside McDonald's, Burger King and KFC then?
As unemployment soars and our benefits bill balloons out of control, a new task force is cracking down on claimants.
Fresh breath, especially if your interview is first thing on a morning.
To work out who really needs help.
I've been treated like I'm not even poorly.
But how easy is it to separate who's milking the system
He's not come back in at all.
from those who genuinely want to work?
Don't apologise too much, otherwise I'll think you're a tart.
I've come here to get a job out of it, not to build little daft structures.
Fantastic.
Benefit Busters, Thursday at 9 on 4.
The new Lexus RX 450h has an advanced full hybrid system which delivers greatly enhanced performance and breakthrough emission levels by switching seamlessly between electric and petrol power.
Because we want to help as many people as possible to see better, get 2 pairs of glasses when you spend £75 or more at Boots Opticians.
At Sainsbury's, family favourites like Ribena and Walkers are now half price. Perfect for the kids' summer holidays and your pocket.
Tessa Sanderson is a gold medal winning Olympian, but how will she cope playing wife to controversial football legend Ron Atkinson?
Bloody hell, fire. Oh, I think she'll bully me to death.
What happened? I don't want to discuss it, Tess, honestly. Get the story.
Celebrity wife swap after revelations.
The great religions are rooted in sacred texts still regarded by many as the timeless revelation of God and the source of all knowledge. They were revealed to ancient societies living between 1500 and 3500 years ago, and they contain much that reflects the moral values and the state of knowledge of their time. The question that seems to be tearing all the great faiths apart is, how should we regard these texts today? Should we believe, for instance, that a loving God could condemn those who offend him to an eternity of torture? Does hell exist? And if it does, how do you picture hell?
My concept of hell, I suppose, is being stuck with myself forever and with no way out. Whether anybody ever gets to that point, I have no idea. But that it's possible to be stuck with my selfish little ego for all eternity. That's what I would regard as hell.
So hell may not exist, and if it does, it's not a place of torment and burning. It's being thrown back on yourself.
Which is torment enough, I think, if you think about it.
But in the Christian Gospels, hell is real. No ambiguity, no room for gentle speculation. Jesus himself spells it out. The fires of hell, the torments that await the damned. The Quran also has vivid descriptions of hell and a paradise. Lovingly evoked in this Iranian palace, built to represent the gateway to heaven as described in the Quran. Lush greens, shaded couches, flowing fountains, and wide-eyed virgins in permanent attendance. Are these descriptions to be understood literally?
The Quran, in this dimension, is talking to Arabs living in the desert. And it's just portraying to them it will be the fulfillment of your human desires. Everything that you want, everything which is, good for you now, you will find it in paradise. So these are metaphors, images of something which is, this is where God will welcome you if you are faithful to his message.
Well, let's move from paradise, which started this discussion. How should we regard the punishment specified in the Quran? Lashes, crucifixion, or the injunction that permits a husband to beat his wife? I mean, how should we approach this?
No one can deny the fact that corporal punishment are in the Quran, and even, killing someone, what we call today the death penalty, and this is in the Quran. Even stoning is in the prophetic tradition, and beating the wife is. There is one verse, there is a mention of this, so we cannot deny this. So my position on this is that you cannot read this verse literally. You have to put it in the whole context of the revelation, and to be able to say at the end, beating your wife is against the Islamic tradition, it's against the Islamic message.
But the literal truth of the sacred texts has been the central premise of all the great faiths for hundreds, if not thousands of years. All Christians must accept the authenticity of every word attributed to Christ in the Gospels. And even today, millions and millions of Christians worldwide believe in the Genesis account of a six-day creation. For Muslims, the Quran is the Word of God as dictated by the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. It is not a commentary, it is not the work of men inspired by God, it is the voice of God. And Orthodox Jews are required to believe absolutely in the divinity of every single word of the Torah, corresponding to the first 5 books of the Old Testament in the Christian Bible. The Torah was the gift of God to Moses on Mount Sinai. How does one reconcile these ancient texts with the insight science has given us and a moral sense that is continually evolving?
I think we need to come to the Bible with enormous openness, eagerness to be taught. Now, that doesn't mean, I think, that you have to regard every single verse of Genesis, let's say, as recording history in the sense we now understand it.
My point is really also to be able to change the Muslim mentality. My first step for me is today to say we have to stop all that and to come with some scholars and all the scholars we can, and to start again this interpretation of these verses.
I don't believe that you can have a religion without that sense of interpretation. Fundamentalism is the attempt to move from text to application without interpretation. And that is something Orthodox Judaism regards as heresy. Simply to treat the Bible literally is, the rabbis say, a form of heresy.
So nothing is static in religion. Things are continually changing and evolving.
We believe in Judaism that God discloses himself through the arena of time.
Free yourself from literalism, and the conflict between science and religion is over. The discovery of our diminished status in the universe, which traumatized the Catholic Church for centuries, can now be seen as the revelation of the full extent and majesty of God's creation. even evolution can be seen as God's design. But is it that easy? Darwin himself wrestled with the implications when he wrote, "Creation offers nothing but blind, pitiless indifference, in which each form is utterly destroyed while others take its place." Can we really believe that this pitiless process is the creation of a loving God?
Things die so that other things shall be born. I don't see that as tragic. I think that is the condition of love, of meaning, of joy, and of hope.
I think that the Darwinian picture of a pitiless creation is what I sometimes think of as a 3 o'clock in the morning picture of the world. We all have those moments of thinking this is all so futile, it's all going to end, and it's full of suffering. And yet, looked at from another perspective, we are capable of meaning, of love, of relation, of prayer, and that is valuable whether or not it lasts forever.
Capable of meaning, love, and relationships, yes, but creation is pitiless in its design. We're programmed to degenerate and die, to shuffle painfully out of the way so that others may take our place. If I may share a very personal experience, my mother died recently after an 8-year slide into dementia that left her unable to speak, unable to eat without assistance, unable to recognize anybody. Conditions like hers not only raise questions about God's design, but the very idea of an immortal soul. At what stage, I kept asking, did her spirit leave us?
Well, I've also sat close to a family member in that situation, and there are few things more painful than to watch somebody, as it were, disappearing in front of your eyes. Whatever happens in those dreadful periods where you can't relate to someone's identity any longer, what happens isn't that the body's left and something has gone somewhere else, but that God may very well be dealing with people at levels we can't begin to imagine or understand. It's the best sense I can make of it, but it's brutally difficult.
For me, only one thing is certain. Our 5 religious thinkers are among the most engaging, intelligent, honest, and compassionate men it has ever been my privilege to meet. Perhaps that was to be expected. The surprise, though, was to discover how much closer they are to each other than to many of those who claim to share their beliefs. Whether this coming together is evidence of God's guiding hand or something we might call the human spirit at its best remains a matter of faith.
What was the relationship between Princess Margaret and a member of the criminal underworld? The Princess and the Gangster, tomorrow at 8. Followed at 9 by Kwame Kwei-Armah, heading down under as he retraces the Queen's historic tour of 1953. Next tonight on 4, Ron Atkinson and Tessa Sanderson, a celebrity wife swap.
Down to the supermarket. Going down to the supermarket. Going down to the supermarket. I'm gonna keep my shopping.
Catch up and classics for free on 4OD. Now available at your convenience.
The total is... it's all free. I love you. Say it back. Say you love me. Loves me.
Are you gonna teach us anything, or are we just gonna sit here?
I've got a hangover. Who knows what that means?
Doesn't that mean you're drunk?
No, it means I was drunk yesterday.
Air guitars at the ready.
I think it's time we started our new class project. New schedule, 8:15 to 10, rock history. 10 to 11, rock appreciation. It will blow the classical music out your butt.
Jack Black swaps the fretboard for the blackboard.
Yeah, now raise your goblet of rock.
I find your methods of teaching very unusual.
If you want to rock, you gotta break the rules.
School of Rock. Next Sunday at 8 on 4.
Big Brother at 9 finds Charlie and B as best mates until he does something silly. First on 4, Tessa Sanderson and Ron Atkinson. It promises to be an interesting match in Celebrity Wife Swap.
70-year-old footballing legend Ron Atkinson was something of a national treasure until he made a racist remark that cost him his career.
We move on. I've always been very resilient. Whatever happens, you just bounce back.
He and his wife Maggie, 60, have been together 27 years, and she plays the dutiful wife in their 6-bedroom mansion near Birmingham.
He doesn't do anything around the house, really. He lives here.
Olympic gold medalist Tessa Sanderson is 53 and prides herself on being a black role model.
There's still a lot of people out there who feel that, you know, this is my Britain, not yours.
And it's all about fair play in the East London home she shares with partner, former judo champion, Denzine White.
So you're both still very young. What do you think your prospects are?
This is it, isn't it? It's just getting worse and worse and worse. It's not something that's just going to go away. It's only getting worse and worse and worse.
I won't have kids, mate, because I've got no future. My lady's on at me to have kids, mate, and I said there's no way. There's no future, is there? The only way, what you're going to do, hope they'll move Australia or somewhere like that. That was the land that they bought it for £1. They're favouring on them.
Favouritism, isn't it?
Gaz and Lee believe the land this mosque is being built on was sold for £1.
You're just giving it away, isn't it? I think £1's the least someone can buy a piece of land for, so they just sold it for £1.
Actually, the land has been leased for £1 a year by the local council, not sold, under the condition that a neighbouring community centre for use by all of Stoke's residents must also be built. If it isn't, the lease can be revoked, but the perception of favouritism remains.
This is shouting, all this is Muslim town, really. No, this is like many Afghanistan around here. This was your working class area, this was factory workers wanted. But it's sad, really. It's sad to go, isn't it?
In fact, only 6.5% of the Stoke population is immigrant, mostly Pakistani.
It's not the immigration that I'm annoyed with, it's the mass of that they're actually bringing in. They're bringing in hundreds of thousands of people when there's hundreds of thousands of people, British people, that haven't got a job. So why are they still bringing hundreds of thousands of people in?
Immigration had been one of the key issues in the recent election. I wondered if Gaz and Lee's resentment towards the immigrant population was racist, and were they wrong to expect British jobs for British workers? I asked if they, like many others in Stoke, had ever considered supporting the BNP.
I don't have nothing to do with it, mate.
I don't know much about the BNP, to be honest. I wouldn't vote for them.
I also wondered what their views were of the racist chanting I'd witnessed at EDL demos. I mean, we've been to 3 demos now, and you do hear songs.
Idiots. But you get these idiot football hooligans or NF lads singing that just because they want to ruckus, isn't it? Like, that's the biggest problem with the EDL. You open your arms to people, don't you? But then you're also open to be getting infiltrated, aren't you, as well? And this is a problem you've got to try and get rid of, but I don't know how you're going to get rid of it either, you know what I mean?
Gaz and Lee seemed to be disaffected young men worried about their futures. They didn't seem like hooligans. So I found it hard to see how they got caught up in one of the EDL's most violent riots here in Stoke, in January this year.
Right, it's time, lads, finish your part and we'll go. Come out the pub, basically.
And we knew that it was going to be a big one.
Yeah. It was good, mate. Good atmosphere and stuff.
Oh,
I thought it was brilliant myself.
This is like football, but it's not football. Come round the corner, it's like walking into an abyss. Police everywhere, kettling us in, pushing us in. That was it then, it was more pushing this way, then it was pushing that way, and people wanted to get out. You know, obviously a lot of people lost the rag then. And then I think that's just when it just kind of kicked off big time.
What would you say is the balance between people who want to turn up and have a fight with someone, and they want to turn up and just, you know, sing the songs you want to sing?
Stoke, I'd say 50-50, wants it like. But that's not what it's about, is it? You know, I mean, the police aren't the enemy at the end of the day. If you've channeled all that energy into something useful, you know, you get somewhere, won't you? You know, I mean, a big shame, Arthur, big shame was.
This is it. The minute they fucking hit somebody, that's it, they've had it.
It was becoming clear that the EDL were not a unified group of essentially tolerant people, but a ragbag of factions, some of which are more racist and right-wing than others. As this footage recorded by an EDL supporter suggests, it's a confusing picture, even for the EDL.
Oi, don't shout BNP, boys. No, we're not the BNP. Shut the fuck up like it's EDL, right?
The EDL's next demo was in Bolton. Would the violence continue, or could the political message begin to emerge? Bolton prepared for the EDL. Everyone was advised to stay away. The town centre was effectively on lockdown by the time the EDL arrived.
Cops along the side and along the side. Make sure they don't break the lines.
This isn't even the main group, this is one group. We've been told to go to the square now, and this is massive. This is bigger than anything I've seen so far. Much bigger. An American flag, an Israeli flag, an Indian flag, and a rainbow flag. Which I'm guessing is from a gay or lesbian group here with the EDL. Earlier that day, United Against Fascism members broke police lines and occupied the town square where the EDL was supposed to congregate. Over 50 of them were arrested and removed so that the demo could go ahead.
I am not doing anything wrong, I am a
For some, arguments about racism or Islam were irrelevant. It was clear that they were here for much more personal reasons.
I think the UAF are wrong. The way that they shout Nazi, Nazi, Nazi scum at us. We're not Nazis. We're English people. There's nothing here for us, the people and the working class. White English men of this country, a lot of us out of work, millions of us out of work, we're not being listened to. And the mainstream political parties aren't listening to us. We're poor, we're stuck in poverty, it's a poverty trap. All we want is work, and that's all we want. We've got no voice. The country's dying of death. Dying of death. I don't want to say anymore because I'm getting emotional. Do you want to see me cry? Do you want to see a tear roll from this eye? Because that is what will happen.
I saw a familiar face towards the front of the crowd. It was Kevin Carroll from Luton. What would you say to the UAF who would say, I mean, there's a sign there that says EDL and BNP Nazis?
That's just a funny, that's a funny one, isn't it, really? Because that's rubbish. EDL Nazis. Yeah, right, just look around you. You know, I don't see any Nazis. I don't know any Nazis.
I had seen and heard racism at every demo I'd been to. Some of the things I'd heard were so offensive that we decided not to broadcast them. And they were offensive to all Muslims, and no one nearby did anything to stop them. I wanted to know how Kevin felt about the hateful language I'd heard. There are some songs here, you dirty, smelly bastards. There are elements here.
Yeah, listen, do you know what it is? I mean, if there is, I haven't seen or heard any myself. But if you can't legislate. It's a free country. If people want to attach themselves, I mean, National Front were at one of the demos, and all the lads towed them up the backside and jogged them on. Because you can't stop them people getting in and mooching around. I'm not a racist. Never been a racist. I don't want to associate with racists. So.
Can we have all EDL onto the PA system, please? We're about to start the speeches.
Gurumit was still being pushed forward as the respectable face of the EDL and the voice of its leadership. But just a few weeks earlier, he'd been secretly recorded by a national newspaper that quoted him making a highly racist remark. Today, the message was different. He was very keen to claim that the EDL were in fact not racist.
Claim we are racist right-wing bigots, but we all know that they are wrong. There is no room for the British National Party's views and members in this organisation. Their racist opinions are not welcome here. Because we are righteous, we are humble, we will be loving and we will be forgiven, yet never forgetting we are warriors. We are protectors of all religions, colours and creeds of this land, because we are the English Defence League.
Despite it being a largely peaceful demo for the EDL, something caused demonstrators to surge towards the front lines. The riot squad was sent out, and they started pushing the EDL away from the town square. Tempers began to fray. The riot police just started pushing the EDL back.
Fucking dirty bastards! Cheating fuckers! We're getting beaten up! What's the crap? We just want our country back! EDL! EDL! EDL!
Although the EDL leadership say they want peaceful demos, many members don't need much provocation. And there were skirmishes all the way out of Bolton town centre.
Fuck off! This is our turn! Our turn!
Once again, the images on the news that night would not be good, and the violence is all that will be remembered.
PC-11, bad fucking dickhead! Dickhead! Fucking wants to have a go with a stick! Let him see without a stick!
If they hadn't already, people up and down the country would be writing off the EDL as the same old hooligans we've seen so many times before. I'm in Nottingham to see Gurumit Singh, who's the only EDL leader so far who's agreed to appear on camera. I just want to ask him why, if the EDL are non-violent and non-racist, as they claim, I've seen violence and racism at every EDL demo I've been to so far. And he himself was secretly recorded recently by the News of the World, making comments that were undeniably racist.
How do you, mate? All right?
Yeah.
How do you, Sam? How you doing, mate? All right?
Gurumit is a 28-year-old Indian Sikh, which had made him the perfect face for the EDL. He had eventually agreed to be filmed after many cancellations, but only at a fellow EDL member's house. Tonight, Gurumit was busy doing his homework, researching and writing his next EDL speech.
I'm just doing a bit of research into basically women and Sharia, because they are suppressed under Sharia law. I find it disgusting how they're suppressed so much, especially in this country when they live under the common law. I find it absolutely revolting.
And what would you say to people who said that the EDL are using militant Islam as a kind of legitimate cloak for just classic old school racism.
No, it's not at all. It's
the old thing about...
Our threat isn't against Islam. Obviously, you're going to have your odd dickhead here and there who's going to shout and rear off and even look at me in a disgusting way, you know what I mean? Look at me and think, what's that prick doing on the top table? Well, we don't want these people here, you know what I mean?
At every EDL demo we've been to, there's been some violence and there's been racism.
Yeah.
Every EDL demo.
We don't want these people in our organisation. They're disgusting. They disgust all of us. We're fighting a racist, fascist ideology, so we don't want racists or fascists in our organisation. We'd just be hypocrites then.
The racism and violence we've seen at EDL demos, it hasn't been condemned by the people around it. The stewards haven't come in and grabbed those people. It seems like it's acceptable.
To tell you the truth, I've never seen any racism. I've never seen it once. And I don't believe these chants, when they're saying that, I don't believe it's racist chants. I don't believe they think it's racist, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's just in their punctuality to just shout out and be insulting, you know what I mean? But I don't believe it's actually racist, them saying that, you know what I mean? They are just...
Gurmit's claim to have never seen any racism at any EDL demo seemed dubious. When at the Westminster demo, I'd heard what sounded like racism coming out of his own mouth, amplified for all by a megaphone.
God bless every single person in this country, of all religions, creeds and cultures. And you know what? Even God bless the Muslims, they'll need it for when they're burning in fucking hell.
The speech you gave at Westminster, you said, God bless the Muslims.
Come on now, no.
God bless the Muslims.
All right, yeah, a big apology.
They're going to need it when they burn in hell.
I know, I messed up big time, right? I messed up big time.
And the whole crowd cheered.
I know,
but what you actually said was, not extremist Muslims or militant Muslims, Muslims
I know,
burn in hell.
I know, I fucked it up.
And the whole crowd cheered, that's the problem.
I fucked it up big time. 2 days before, that speech was published on the internet, on the English Defence League website. It said, God bless everybody, even the militant Muslims, you'll need it for when you're burning in hell. Now, I missed out that word like a twat, I apologise so much. I felt so bad, you know, because we've got Muslim members and I thought, oh my God, what are they going to think of me? I felt like the biggest twat, I really do. But I believe the people in front of me, yeah, fair enough, they cheered. Half of them couldn't bloody hear us, you know what I mean? Look at that bloody megaphone, it was terrible, you know what I mean?
The fact that the whole crowd cheered it would suggest to a lot of people that large elements of the EDL are against all Muslims, not just militant
I mean, this is the thing that you've got to understand as well. People need educating, you know what I mean? Even people of the English Defence League need educating. True members of the English Defence League are against militant Islam. We're against radical Muslims, you know what I mean? That's what we're against. We're not against Muslims.
The EDL insist they don't have a problem with all Muslims, just the extremists. One group in particular seemed to fuel most of their theories about the threat to English culture and identity. Back in Luton's Bury Park, I went to see Saif al-Islam, who used to be the local leader of the militant Islamist group called Al-Muhajirun, before it was banned. You're just setting up?
Yeah, just setting up.
For Saiful, Islam isn't a private spiritual activity, it's an ideology. It alone provides the solution to all the world's problems, and all of the world should adopt it. But just to be clear, what is the solution to the problems you see?
Islam. Islam is the solution. When I talk about I want to establish Islam, I mean Islam as an authority, as a political system, in the form of the Khilafah. And I believe through this Islamic state, we're going to solve a lot of the problems that we're facing under democracy, under the British government. You got Mama find out about Islam?
But if you had an Islamic state in the UK, what would the law...
And for harm. And I do believe that God right now is setting us the most serious challenge we have ever been set. He has given us many faiths, but only one world in which to live together. And unless we as religious individuals can meet that challenge, no shift of perception is even going to be relevant. We must somehow find a way of seeing the trace of God in the face of a stranger.
And if we fail, are we to expect more and more of this? 19 men on a mission of mass murder in the name of their faith and in the certainty of their reward in the life to come.
Rational and violent.
Yes, I think you're right. What we are facing now is really a perception that religions are responsible and religious people responsible of atrocities and violence. Use of religions to kill people, to kill innocent people, and to promote a kind of us versus them. The dogmatic minds. This is where we have to struggle. So there is coming back to the essence of your religion and being able to face the people from your own religious community who are betraying the very essence of your religion.
Religion is one of the most powerful forces in human life, and all powerful forces can be used for good or for ill.
History begins. Dogma that seems to ignore the reality of the human condition is serious enough. Even more alarming is a rising tide of fanaticism and murder committed in the name of religion. Since the fall of communism, virtually all the great conflicts of our time are, at root, religious conflicts. Men, it's usually men, claim God-given authority to suspend all the rules of human decency and to massacre, mutilate, and terrorize in God's name. How can people of faith like you change the perception that religion is running of condoms and safe-sex literature? What shapes Catholic and Protestant evangelical attitudes to sexuality, particularly in relation to abortion and stem cell research, is the idea that the human embryo is endowed with an immortal soul at the moment of conception. But most embryos never implant in the womb. They're naturally expelled from the body and die, meaning that heaven must be mostly populated by people who never existed. Does that make any sense?
I quite understand that many moments of embryonic conception do not come to fulfillment. But the prudent position, it seems to me, is to say that's when the...
To forbid the use of condoms, either as a form of birth control or as protection against HIV.
I think, I would want to say that condoms don't lack their advocates. There are plenty of people who are doing that. And I don't know, you will know better than I, but my impression is that they're well available in places. I think the deeper point that the Church wants to make is, in a phrase, to keep sexuality as profoundly human.
A cardinal supervises the ceremonial burning